Audrey, thank you so much for being with us today on this beautiful Friday. Are you done for the week or do you sew on the weekends too?
I do. Saturday is actually my big day. I have I want to say 10 appointments tomorrow, which is a little nutty, but prom. So,
Oh, that's right, prom.
yeah.
Hashtag prom.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have like different schools that have different dates, or are they all on the same date?
They're pretty spread out for me, but I will say most of the schools, I think the bulk of my prom is done because most of the schools' prom is this weekend.
Yeah.
So they kind of started last weekend, and then the junior proms all happen in June. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of going through those are getting picked up right now. So I'm kind of
Nice.
finishing out prom,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. And I feel like this was the year of like sequins on the dresses. I'm like, can't we just go back to
yes.
like basic, almost like bridesmaid
Yeah.
looking dresses for prom? Come on. They're getting too
I'm
fancy.
yeah, what is up with the amount of horsehair?
Thank
Everybody
you.
needs to relax. Don't do it if you're a prom lady listening to this. Don't do it to us.
Avoid the horsehair. I know. And then it just gets caught. I know. Well, I'm really excited to have you on the episode or on our podcast this week because you're kind of a little legend. And I say little because like, how old are you?
I'm 19, but I turn 20 next month. So,
Okay. So a wee lass, but you do have this thriving business. And it's been so cool kind of watching your growth and watching you start like fresh out of high school, pretty much, and then getting the guts to find a space outside of your home. And I really want to focus our conversation on that. Like, moving out of the home, because I know that there are so many women on the cusp of that. Like, should I do it? Should I not? Like going back and forth. And there's that pros and cons list. So I want to hear about, I guess, where the inspiration of the business started to begin with. And then we'll get into how you got brave enough to get your own space and start, yeah, moving out of the house. So tell us
yeah.
how Rose Fine Alterations began. Let's start there.
Yeah. So I always did sewing and stuff throughout high school. I did it for community theaters. I know you're a theater kid too. So
Yep.
costumes for theater
We're
and
choir nerds together.
yeah, exactly. Nerds forever. But I did costumes, and then I actually did an apprenticeship towards senior year of high school, kind of end of senior year, because that was I graduated class of 2020. So we hit COVID and everything was super up in the air, and all the things that I had originally planned, it kind of felt like weren't gonna happen.
Yes.
So I was like, well, I'll try this apprenticeship. We'll see how it goes. And just kind of keep I don't know, just keep trucking along. So I did this apprenticeship and I totally fell in love with altering bridal gowns. And it was I just kind of leaned into that, and I learned more and I did more exploring in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the apprenticeship ended and I was trying to find a job, and I drove an hour and a half to go visit an alteration shop, but it was never going to work
Yeah.
there because it was so far. So I kind of had this idea of doing it myself. Well, and other people in my life had kind of been encouraging me, why don't you just open it? Because we had a tailor in my town that had retired 5 years prior. So people were always saying oh gosh, where do I take my stuff anymore? And I would do some of that out of my house, but I didn't really have I didn't set up a business or anything. I didn't have a Facebook page or all that. So yeah, then I was kind of not looking into spaces at first because I thought I could just keep doing it out of my house, but I live with a bunch of other people, so it would have been kind of chaotic to have fittings in my house. So I was so it literally was just a Google search where I was commercial spaces in my town under, this amount of square footage within this budget. And there was actually quite a couple of options, which I wasn't expecting.
Wow.
Yeah. So literally, I think it was it's almost like Zillow, but for commercial spaces, realtor.com or whatever. And you just switch it to commercial spaces mode, and you can just kind of look through at all these different places.
Yeah. So when did you start your LLC or whatever? Was that not until you moved into the commercial space?
Yeah. So I applied. So actually, I'm not an LLC. I'm actually a sole proprietor.
Okay.
And so that's something kind of unique about me, which it was kind of because of my age, I don't own anything. So I don't have any assets to protect. So a sole proprietorship was really low risk for me.
Yeah.
So I'm a sole proprietorship right now. So I just, the only thing you have to do for that is apply for a business license through your town. And you did have to have a location to do that. So I did not apply for that until I had my space like set up. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that is so neat because wow, that is even more gutsy than I initially thought. Most people that I know, it's like, you know, you get the license and you start doing it at home and then kind of building it up until you're ready to move out. But that was like a really big step. Oh my goodness. So when you did your apprenticeship, because I'm thinking of like, okay, 2020, that's when, at least in my area, and I feel like at that point it was like nationwide, like weddings kind of came to a halt.
Oh yeah.
Still were able to have enough experience. And I'm sure like with the costuming too, that really helped through high school. So did you ever feel like, I guess, how did you overcome the fears of like, what if I get a dress that I can't do? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that was some
couple months.
Yeah, no, totally. That was something that totally like almost gave me an anxiety attack. And that was always my like response when people were like,
gives me an anxiety attack.
Yeah, exactly. People were like, why don't you just open one yourself? And I was like, well, I don't like, what if a gown comes in and I don't know what to do with it? Like, what am I just going to stand there? But then I ended up kind of finding this whole, like nowadays with Instagram and everything, we have this big like seamstress network online. So, and I had always watched bridal sewing techniques, YouTube. I'd always watched that for fun because, you know, I'm a big technique geek. So I watched her stuff for like years. And so I was like, well, I guess if I ever really had a problem, I could like message one of these ladies and maybe it would work out. And it did. And I will say, like, if you're really fearful about that, taking on some projects like kind of for free is okay in my opinion. Like I took like a full suit, which is something I'd never done before, and I took that on at my house and I did it like for a very, very low rate just to get the experience. They gave me a ton of time to do it. And that was like a huge experience for me because sometimes the way you learn is just taking apart garments and putting them back together. So. Yeah.
And I think that the value of like portfolio years is so important, and just having like, okay, that time to like, and understanding that it's fair to your client too, to not charge as much, obviously. When you know that they're going to be kind of the guinea pig a little bit, and giving yourself grace for that too. Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
So when you started, and like I said, like you were like fresh out of high school, what challenges do you think you faced that maybe somebody older in the profession who's getting started, maybe they wouldn't have to face? Like with your age, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, especially when I looked at two spaces actually before I moved into my current space. And pro tip, if you're young, do not bring your mom to come look at the space because I've just brought her for like a second set of eyes. But they will definitely think that your parents are like footing the bill and will direct all of their information and all of their attention towards your mom, even though you're like, hey, I'd actually like to know about the utilities at this place. So
that is so funny. But okay, yeah. Okay, so don't bring your mom. Okay, what else? What
don't
other
bring your
kind
mom.
of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, and definitely be prepared for people to tell you that it won't work out. There was definitely a lot of that, and people like needing an explanation for why I was doing that. Like, why don't you just go do something else or whatever? There's definitely always going to be doubters. Right. But I think that's true. I think that's probably true of any age where there's going to be people like, really? Just because, you know, and just like the expectation nowadays is kind of like you finish high school and you go straight to college. And so if you kind of do something different, if you do something different, people are naturally like, wait, why?
Right.
So, and it doesn't mean it's good or bad. I think it's just like kind of unusual.
Right. Right. And it's like very gutsy. And I think when you do gutsy things, it kind of like scares people a little bit, you know? And so, And that probably, like you mentioned, it doesn't matter your age at that point, because when you do things outside the box, whatever your age, people are going to kind of question it and be like, are you sure? Yeah. Like, So have you had people or clients, maybe like mothers of the bride, question your ability? Because
every once in a while. Luckily, the thing is once you get, like, I was so lucky that I've only been open for like 14 or 15 months and I already have like a pretty good amount of reviews. So
Nice.
once you kind of get that initial hump of reviews, and you need to have really good photos of your work, like before and after. So once you get that under your belt, like it's not as much an issue, because people will say like, oh my gosh, I saw on Instagram you did Susie's
Right.
dress and it came out amazing. So at that point, age doesn't matter as much. But
Right.
definitely
Once
in
the
the
word
very
of mouth
beginning,
travels. Mhm.
yeah, definitely in the very beginning, when people don't really know you or know like your skill level, you know, you have to kind of present yourself like a professional, and then they'll perceive you as a professional.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but definitely there was a couple people. I mean, nobody. Every once in a while, somebody will like overtly ask me my age, because especially because the name is Rose Fine Alterations, they'll come up and be like, "Are you Rose?" And they like
Yeah.
were expecting like a 70-year-old lady, and it's just name. So sometimes I get people, like I had one lady walked in the door and was like, "Oh, sweetie, where's your mom?" And I was like, "Oh no, actually it is me." And she was like, "You do the sewing?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Oh, sweetie. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I've
was
had
great.
that just when I first started, the same thing. It was just a couple, and it wasn't the bride, it was the mother of the bride, and they were just a little cautious, like, "Okay, you sure you know what you're doing?" Like that kind of thing.
Yes.
So you like, when I was working from home, it was a perk because I loved, like, obviously not having to leave my house. And there were some great perks with having everything in one space and like not moving out or doing anything commercially. And you kind of already touched on this at the beginning of our conversation, but like, what was the deciding factor that made you feel like, okay, I have to take this outside of the house if I really want it to grow?
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was like I was talking about appearing like a professional. Like I think so
Mhm.
much of it is you have to set it up professional, and then people are going to treat you like a professional. Because my house, I have I have four siblings and my parents and everything, and my parents work from home. So like having somebody come in my house and like all my younger siblings are like
Yes.
around, and there's like, book bags on the floor. Like I felt like people would kind of not really trust what I was going to do.
Mhm.
And I think it would have been, and especially because like we have a pet and stuff, so it would have been hard to take like wedding gowns and them to really trust like it's going to stay perfect here. So there wasn't ever really a question in my mind whether or not it was going to happen outside my house. I felt like outside the house would be best for the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Cause you mentioned too, like that's when you first made everything official, was once you got out of the house, which is just so cool. Like you just don't hear of that process, like that order that often. And I know some women are really, and men, I mean, tailors and seamstresses, like they have like a separate entrance to the home, or they have the ability to like make everything like clean and like welcoming and professional at home. But if you don't have that option, yeah, like the opening your mind to like getting out of the house, great. And so how, like where you did your apprenticeship, and we don't need to go into like the nitty gritty of like the details of the names or whatever, but was that, did you like the way their space was set up, or were there things that you were like, okay, for my own sake, like, or for my own personal space, I don't want to have the same layout or whatever?
Yeah, part of the reason I looked into like even opening the shop was because while I was apprenticing, I would tell other people in my life like, "Oh man, I just wish we had it set up like this. It would be so much more like bridal shop or whatever." And like it was just kind of, the space was like very industrial, and it was set up for like getting work done, and it was good, and it was more set up to be like a store, and it wasn't like super conducive to alterations, and it was hard to fit all the equipment in that particular space. So I just wanted something like kind of pretty and laid out like a bridal shop, because I feel like the bridal shop experience is like you go and it's this gorgeous boutique, and sometimes there's like champagne and stuff, and I don't have champagne here, nobody get excited, but because I can't buy it. But
gotta wait a couple years for that one.
But I just was thinking like if it was decorated really beautifully, and if it was kind of a cute like family style space, like I love having guests in my shop, I felt like that would be such an asset to it, because it's kind of like, I still feel like it's a special part of like the wedding planning process. Like,
yes, totally.
Going to each of the fittings, it's kind of like another one of those things you do during the engagement season that's like really special and you kind of always remember.
Yeah.
So
yeah, 100%. So how do you, I know that you said that you Googled some spaces, but once you were like, okay, I graduated from high school, now I'm ready to start the business. Like what steps other than like Googling the space, like how did you even come up with your budget? Like the very basics of how to find a space.
Yeah, so I was very lucky that I worked at a small business before opening the shop.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I had told the owner that I kind of had this idea for the shop, he really like kind of gave me some tips and like some ways to understand like how you kind of save up for that type of thing and what you need to have saved up. And kind of gave me some realistic expectations for how it
Yeah.
is renting your own space. So, I I had been saving for a while, but I kind of thought I was saving for college. And then I
Yeah.
was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely tried to make sure, like when I was looking at how much I wanted to spend per month on a space, I tried to make sure I had like at least 6 to 12 months saved so that because I was really worried, like I would walk in and I wouldn't have anybody for a
Oh
while.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, I need to make sure I have something there so that it's not like I'm a year in and I can't pay rent.
Right. Right.
So I definitely recommend that, especially like where I was starting, where I didn't really have like a client base at all. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you probably don't have to save as much if you've been doing it out of your home for like years and years because you have
Right.
this base of clients and reviews and people who are going to come to your retail space.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so in that case, I think that's a safer bet because you're like, oh, I know these people are going to show up, or maybe you already have brides on your books where you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I know I'm going to have some income these months.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. But then just to go in and so how long did it take for you to have like a regular income stream after, or even like client stream once you moved out?
Yeah, I mean, I was super lucky that town Facebook pages became like my best friend, and I was able to because in the beginning you have to kind of not freak out because you spend a lot of money on furniture and supplies, and I had to get a new machine, and there's kind of a lot of initial expenses that feel
Yeah.
scary. But I had I like broke even. I don't know like how to say. I broke even 3 months in, which is crazy because I
Yeah.
was working with a business coach and they were like, don't expect to make anything for like 2 years. But I actually made something like month
Yeah.
4. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Well, that's great. And I'm so glad that you had a business coach through that because I was going to ask
Yeah.
that's, I mean, just having somebody else to kind of come alongside you through each step and tell you like, this is normal, this is normal. All that
Yeah,
stuff,
because I was really worried about like the business ownership aspect of it. Because like
Mhm.
once I like got my footing with altering wedding gowns through my apprenticeship, I was like, okay, I'm not really so much worried about sewing skills as I'm worried about like, do I actually know how to pay business taxes? Do I actually know
Right.
what I'm doing? So the business coach was really important for that. So that was great.
Yeah. And you just know that all your bases are covered. I think that's for a lot of people, that's where kind of the fears come in too, because it's like, okay, yeah, we know how to fix things. Or like you said, you know, the resources that you can go to if you need
Yeah,
help. So like we all love bridal sewing techniques. We're big fans
big
around here.
fans all around. Go
Yeah.
Brenda.
And then having like friends that you can ask like sewing questions for. But the business side, I think, is kind of just in general, if I were to like generalize our industry, which I shouldn't, but that is kind of where we kind of drop the ball is like, oh, how am I going to initiate payment? Or yeah, oh yeah, taxes, or like, oh, am I insured? Like all these things that
Yeah.
kind of like slip through the cracks. And so to have somebody to kind of come alongside you and like walk through that stuff is great.
Yes.
So you didn't really have to weigh out like pros and cons. It sounds like it was just like you had this game plan and you're going to take the risk. So like what was your game plan if it didn't work out?
Yeah, so I actually kept so the place I worked at previously was a restaurant, so I kept the restaurant job and I opened my shop from 9 to 4 and then I would
Awesome.
drive across the street and go work at the restaurant from 4 to close. That's what I did for like I did that for only 3 months because then it got to be too
Wow.
much with how many clients I had. But I was like, okay, I have this backup plan. I can do the extra hours. And I was like, okay, my restaurant money will pay rent and it'll be okay. I didn't need that for very long at all.
That is so cool. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great because I do feel like people who come into the industry, like I think of myself too, like when I was teaching, I taught part-time when I knew I wanted to build up the business. And then it was kind of
Yes.
like, okay, then when I got to a certain percentage, I was able to just like leave the teaching gig, once I was making a certain percentage of sewing. So I love how you
Yeah.
had something like just you knew that you would get restaurant money and like you could depend on that and just kind of hustled until you made it.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So where would you like to see your business in like 5 years?
I was struggling with this question so much because I feel like I hit a lot of milestones really early.
Right.
Like if you had told me if we had this podcast like the month I opened and you were like, what's your plan in 5 years? I'd be like, maybe an employee and maybe I buy an industrial sewing machine. And then I ended up like right now I have 2 industrial sewing machines and I have the employee and I have a girl that interns and like I have all this stuff going on. Yeah. So I've been struggling with that where I like to see it in 5 years. But I think probably lost my microphone, sorry.
We lost our microphone.
But I think
talking with our hands.
Yes. Yeah, but something I'm really passionate about is like I want to have apprenticeship opportunities in the future because that was something that like I always kind of had to like create my own thing that I wanted to do. Right. Like the apprenticeship I did wasn't super formal. Like I literally reached out to this shop and they said, okay, you could do something like that. But I feel like we're kind of seeing this, like influx of need for wedding alterations because
100%.
Not very many people do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we don't have people that might like to do that. It's just we don't really have any way of like training people.
Right.
And there is some, there's like, you can go to fashion school and stuff, but it's kind of like a different skill set. And I just think if there was like easier access to education in this field, that would be really cool. So I'd love to have like the big dream is to have like an official apprenticeship on like apprenticeship.gov where like people can apply. And like, I don't know. I just think that would be super cool to have that kind of training for seamstresses.
So how did you find, I'm kind of backtracking because there's a lot of good stuff that you just said. So how did you even find your first employee and how intimidating was that?
Yeah. Oh, it was so scary. It's definitely new territory for me. So I wish I could say I was like on the other side, like, oh my gosh, I'm killing it in every way, but I'm still learning and I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. So it was just like, last year, especially during prom season, it got so busy and it grew so much faster than I was expecting. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, I didn't even think about like capping the amount of alterations I took because I just didn't think I'd get enough where I ever had to cap it. Right. So then, after a couple of like midnight sewing sessions and getting up at 4:00 in the morning, I was like, oh, this isn't sustainable. So then people would be like, I would be like, okay, so this isn't great. So then I was like, people were like, oh my gosh, well, you're so busy. Well, it's time to hire. And I was like, I'm not ready for that. I know. And especially as a sole proprietor, like I'm not necessarily set up to have a ton of employees. Mm-hmm. So the employee I have right now is a 1099 contractor, which is great. And she does some sewing for me. Sue, if you're listening, you are the moment. You are a legend. Great. Yeah.
Where did you find Sue? How did she?
Sue, I actually worked with her before. I did costumes with her like way back in the day at theater companies. Yeah. Okay. So I already knew that, I did have some other people. I put it on like Indeed and I had like 3 other people apply, but they like kind of weren't as interested. And she was like really ready to come in. So I was like, and I already knew her. So I was like, sweet. Nice.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And she just comes in 1 day a week for now because I'm still kind of like learning and everything. And like I said, she's like a contractor. But she does work at my shop and that kind of thing.
That's a great way to get started if you feel like even the thought of hiring an employee sounds intimidating. Like we talked about earlier, like all the extra things like, okay, the taxes and the and like whatever, Medicaid or whatever comes out of your paycheck.
Yeah.
Those things kind of are like, I don't know. So the 1099 is a great first step. And that's awesome. A good like little nugget to tuck away if you're thinking of
definitely. Like even if you're just thinking to yourself, like, I just wish somebody would just like seam rip or rip my horsehair hems like 1 day a week. Like I think a 1099 is a great way to do that. Just for those, like, if you just need like a couple of extra hours a week and you have somebody who's willing or who wants to learn or something, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for a lot, and like myself included, there are a lot of tasks that if you're feeling like, okay, the business is my baby or whatever, and it's hard to think of hiring out. But yes, if you can list the tasks out, and what tasks can you divide up if you're not willing to like hand over clients. And we know,
Yes.
seamstresses who have employees who, take on like full dresses, and then their work is reviewed, whatever. But I think that's a great idea, is even if you just want to like rip out seams or give out the tasks. That's really wise. That's just so cool that you already have all this wisdom like at 19. That's
Not
awesome.
really. It's mostly like learning from other people and, just kind of like learning by mistake. Cause like I said, I was like, oh, I'm never hiring anybody. It's a one woman show up in here. But then a couple of a couple of weeks of like having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, not getting sewing done in time, having to move pickup times, really was like, okay, something has to change and I have to troubleshoot this. So like, what is the best way out?
Right.
So,
Right. That's awesome. So, okay, I'm thinking of the listeners who are maybe on the fence about like moving out, staying home. Maybe they have a different situation than you, like they can stay home. So kind of thinking outside the box, but what final piece of advice could you give them if they absolutely need to get out, or also if they're kind of comfortable at home, how would you convince them?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say if you have like consistent clients out of your house, like just imagine that like literally tripled in a retail space. And I mean, I don't know people's area and stuff, so maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm just thinking like if you already have that client base and you already have tons of like 5-star reviews and people posting about you on social media, like when you get into a retail space, I just love it because then you can like decorate it and you can really curate it like how you want your kind of brand to be.
Yes.
And I don't know. I just feel like then it's very much like a business entity. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you can,
totally.
I like it too, because then you can drive home and you can't sew because you're not there. So
how was the drive home? Exactly. Yeah. Would you say that it's like a confidence boost too?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely like made me feel more like a business owner when it was like, okay, I rent this spot and this is where my shop is. Like I have a physical shop. This isn't like something I do on the side as a hobby. Like this is my job.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
It's the real deal. Yeah. So I'm wondering, I don't know like the age of our listeners, but if there are any young sewists in high school, and you've already touched on this, how like the expectation is, okay, you graduate, you go to a 4-year college, and trade school has kind of lost. I mean, my husband went to trade school, so I'm like a big fan of that. And
no like rah trades in my house.
Yes. And it just isn't acknowledged or like talked about as much. So speaking to like our younger listeners, can you talk to, just talk about kind of breaking the mold and kind of getting over the expectation that other people might have of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially like in my area, like you definitely, like you said, it's just that track where you graduate and you go to 4-year school. But if you're like when I was touring colleges and stuff, like I had every intent of going, but then I was touring and I just like totally cannot picture myself there. And I didn't know what I would major in and I really didn't know what to do. But this was just something that felt like I was capable of and like I really wanted to do. And I felt like this time of my life I really wanted to do. So I would just say like if you and especially if other people in your life are encouraging you, like, yes, I think this is something you could actually do, just go for it. And like, if you still have to work at a restaurant at night, then like hustle, you know what I mean? It teaches a lesson. I don't know. I think like maybe my grandparents' generation, like people did that where they would open businesses when they were in their early 20s or things like that, or go into trades instead of going to college. But we've kind of like flipped this other direction. But there's still just as many jobs in trades as there is in, STEM or healthcare or other things. So
yes. Oh my goodness. To all of that. Absolutely. And like, there's such a need now. So I love all of that. And maybe also within 5 years or something, you can like write a book about this. Or start like a blog for like, people in high school. Cause I just think too, like when I was in high school, it also wasn't a thing where like you can do something before going to college. Like it just really wasn't talked about. And I think of how many young people, especially now, like just what's been going on in the world the past couple of years, and like they're probably questioning like long-term plans and just ideas. And like, I wish there were more resources for young people who just want to like jumpstart a career.
Oh yeah.
Start the business. So we can add that to your to-do list in the next
Oh
week.
yeah. No, that's exactly how it was. Like, it was just like COVID. I think COVID totally spurred me to open the shop because it was just like, well, what is even life? So let's just do this.
Yeah. And were you at that time, like if you were to have gone to college, would it have been like online anyway?
I guess so. I mean, I had most of the schools I was looking at, I think went back in person, but I just couldn't figure out, like, I don't know if I go to design school. I don't know if I major in business. I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. And maybe, you know what, when I'm 60 and I'm rich and famous, I think I'll go get my PhD or something. But just for now, I'm just kind of winging it.
That sounds like a great plan. Well, Audrey, thank you so much again for like chatting about all the things. And I think that you've just encouraged a lot of listeners, whether they're like young seamstresses are interested in the business, or, you know, women who are thinking about, you know, just taking that leap and moving out. That was really encouraging. So where can we find you and follow your business travels and maybe even get inspiration? Like, you can leave us your website info or your social media info.
Oh yeah, totally. My Instagram is at @RoseFineAlterations. During prom season, it is very lackluster, but during off season, I do make reels, and sometimes they're funny. You know, my mom thinks they're lame, but I think they're pretty sick. So check them out. And then my website is mostly just for if you're in Southbridge and you want bridal alterations, feel free to check it out. It's just rosefinealterations.square site. So
that's great. And it's nice to see other websites, especially people who are like trying to like, you know, just get the basics and build out. It's nice to see other seamstresses who have
always, if you have any interest, always creep on other people's Instagrams and look at all that stuff. It's so great. No, I totally do that.
It takes you far. Yeah.
Yeah. Be a creeper. My last piece of advice, be a creeper.
Okay. I think that might be your little like intro, your little episode.
Yeah. That's so bad.
Thank you, Audrey, so much. And good luck with your long day of sewing tomorrow. Your long
Thank
Saturday.
You. Yeah. It's going to be a good day.
Okay. We'll get you back on here soon. Next topic.
Thank you. Yes. Have a good day, Nadine.